What is up, everybody? Welcome to this week's edition of the Touchline Talk Show. Plenty to get to. We're going to be heavily international focused today with both the U.S. Women's National Team ramping up for the CONCACAF W Championship, as well as the men's under 20s getting incredibly close to qualifying for the Olympics at the U20 Championship. So we're going to start with both of those, sort of a recap, looking forward to what we can expect, the biggest questions on the women's national team front, and then really excited to also dive into the Euros, which are exactly 1 week away from today. So really good stuff in store tonight. And as I mentioned, we're going to begin with last night's second matchup against Colombia for the U.S. women's national team. You have a thunder delay. You have an Ashley Hatch altercation that easily could have resulted in a red card. And at the end of the day, you have a 2-0 victory. For me, this was nowhere near as convincing an offensive performance as you saw in the first game against Colombia. My thing after that game was the finishing, the final product was just not good enough. Mallory Pugh had a really rough night, and Ashley Hatch didn't seem to combine with the rest of that front line very well. But the chances were there. The chances were plentiful, and that's why the misses were so glaring. You didn't see as much of that in this game. In the first half, you didn't see, of course, the taking of the chances. But this was more of a quality chance creation issue than it was an execution issue for me. So it's a little bit different than what you saw the first time. And give credit to Colombia. Both games, they really found a way to disrupt the United States, hang in there defensively, and really had a good showing for themselves on both occasions. Couple notable things here. First, congratulations to Carson Pickett for making history. Very, very cool thing there. First person to have a limb disability, and I don't think I'm using the right word, and I apologize for that, to get a cap for the U.S. national team. Congratulations to her. Awesome accomplishment. Very, very obvious story of not letting other people define you, not giving up on your dreams. So congratulations, Carson Pickett, getting the start at left back and playing quite well. Of course, she's North Carolina Courage player in the NWSL, so you can go check her out anytime you want with the Courage. She will not be heading to the actual W Championship, though. She was one of those 3 players brought in to kind of fill out the squad for these 2 games and to be there in case something were to happen. Finally, the U.S. do get on the board. It doesn't take all that long. Sofia Huerta sends in a cross. It gets headed into the Colombia net for an own goal. Wasn't pretty. Wasn't the result of a terrific build-up, although she got herself in a good position to deliver that cross, and when you put crosses into dangerous spots, good things happen. And you had a couple dangerous crosses other than that, but there just really was not a lot going on. It was, the possession was there, as it always is, but the cutting Colombia open you saw in the first game, there was not a lot of that going on here. And the other side of this is that while the U.S. still dominated this game, absolutely had the much better chances, deserved to win, there was a little bit of danger that Colombia posed, and that was just not the case in the first game. Alyssa Nair actually had to do a couple things. She got caught off her line once, and somebody attempted to chip her. She did make a good save at one point, early in the second half. And part of why one of the differences in terms of the chance creation and what you saw going forward was that Ashley Sanchez got the start, and it just didn't have the same impact she did coming off the bench in that first game. And the midfield in particular, and as a whole, Lindsey Horan was playing as the 6, which limits her ability to do some of the really technical things she's so good at. Rose Lavelle didn't cut Colombia open the way she did in the second half of the first game. And so all of a sudden, you're relying on Alex Morgan to combine to create some things. Midge Purse had a couple good moments, but not having your 2 wingers out there showed as well. There is a gap between Sophia Smith and Mallory Pugh, and in this case, Megan Rapinoe and Midge Purse. And so ultimately, you're up 1. Thunder come back out. Kelly O'Hara, who comes off the bench, scores. So you get the right backs creating both goals. Great, you have that in your arsenal, and Kelly O'Hara has proven, particularly with the spirit, and she's got, I think it's 3 now goals with the U.S. Women's National Team. She can give you a goal and give you something in attack. The question continues to be that front 3, A, who is playing as the number 9, and B, can you finish your chances? It's are you concerned about the lack of goals heading into this W Championship? And I'm not overly concerned, but to me, this is always an exercise in comparing these performances to the best of the best of the best. You can put Canada in that category if the U.S. ends up facing Canada in this tournament, but that's it in CONCACAF. And so it's always part of me doesn't like evaluating these games all that much because you don't learn all that much when you're not playing against some of these teams we're going to talk about later at the Euros that are more on your talent level, and depending on who you ask, might actually feel like there's more talent on that roster, or at least comparable talent. And so I don't think there are any broad, dramatic takeaways from these 2 games. Yeah, you would like to see the offense click a little bit more. You'd like to see a little more ruthlessness in front of the net. To me, the biggest thing is Alex Morgan, A, is in the form of her life, and B, from these 2 games, is much more involved when she's out there. She works better with those wingers, is able to combine. I don't think it's a discussion you start her. And if it doesn't work for whatever reason, you've got Ashley Hatch to go give you something different, to give you an extra striker if you need it for some reason. But this is not a competition for me at this point. Alex Morgan's won that spot, in the short term at least, for this tournament. And, it's probably going to be Ashley Hatch down the line. Would like to see a little more Trinity Rodman as well, in terms of the dynamicism she can offer. But there you go. Didn't give up a goal. 2 victories. Certainly no alarm bells ringing. And so now you get prepared to play Haiti in the first group stage game on July 4th. The other tournament I mentioned before, CONCACAF Men's U20 Championship. And I saw Grant Wall tweeting about this and people pushing back that this tournament has flown under the radar, and that's the fault of us as media for not covering it close enough. I've seen a decent amount of coverage of it. It's a strange combination because on one hand there are 500 million other things to be paying attention to at this moment, and on the flip side, the stakes in this tournament are incredibly high, which is why now that we've gotten through the group stage, I wanted to talk about it, recap, provide some perspective on this team, because there is sort of a similar thing to the women's national team in the sense that the group stage was not all that challenging for the U.S. And so you get to the quarterfinals against Costa Rica Tuesday night, a Costa Rica team that, by the way, had players on the field who had participated in things like World Cup qualifying and the CONCACAF Nations League for the first team. So now we can start talking because the competition level is there. And it was a really overall good performance. Your starting 11 had 8 players currently involved in MLS in some way, shape, or form in terms of the teams they are under contract with. And then you had plenty of other MLS guys coming off the bench. Cade Cowell, Jack McGlynn. You can go down the list. And the LA Galaxy, too, were also well represented here. They had a couple players who started that were in the Galaxy setup at one point and have since moved to Europe to start their professional careers there. But your eight starters. Chris Brady, the Chicago Fire, signed a homegrown deal. Could very quickly find himself playing minutes in MLS, depending on what happens with the goalkeeping situation there and all of this interest allegedly from Europe in the goalie who's basically his age that is currently starting for Chicago in Gagasolina. So we'll see what happens there, but Chris Brady, name to know. And then you've got the Philadelphia Union guys, Brandon Craig, Quinn Sullivan, Paxton Aronson, Caden Clark of the New York Red Bulls, Michael Holiday of Orlando City, Jalen Neal, LA Galaxy, and Diego Luna, who just moved to Real Salt Lake and has been spectacular in this tournament. It's Paxton Aronson, though, who steals the show in this game. He scores in the 5th minute, and then he basically does the same thing to start the second half to give the U.S. a 2-0 victory. Going forward, this team all tournament has been really good, and they score good goals. The creative talent between Quinn Sullivan, Diego Luna, Paxton Aronson, Caden Clark, Cade Cowell, you got plenty of really, really good attacking players here. The shakiness in this game, and if you want to look at something as a concern moving forward, there was some very shaky moments trying to play out from the back. Chris Brady had a kick that got deflected at one point. There were just some opportunities for Costa Rica to capitalize in transition because of sloppiness and an inability to just connect passes and be smart with the ball. That's got to get cleaned up. And Costa Rica did have a chance here or there. We're better in the second half, a little more dangerous. Get a PK at one point, put it over the bar right after Aronson scored to make it 2-0. U.S. was the better team on the night, deserved to win, and easily could have had a third. Quinn Sullivan forced a couple really good saves. And so this win clinches a spot in the U20 World Cup next year and sets up the big one against Honduras on Friday for a spot in the Olympics. This would be the U.S.'s first appearance in the Olympics, should they win this game, since 2008. I'm going to say that again. This would be the U.S.'s first Olympics since 2008. And if you'll remember, the team that kept them out of the Tokyo Olympics, yeah, that was this Honduras team. Now, it was a little bit different context, a little different age group, but they're going at it again, and only one of them can go. And Honduras has been very, very, very good at qualifying for the Olympics. Why this is such a big deal? Because I see the U20 World Cup as actually a more important argument. And I buy it to a certain extent. The part I care about for the Olympics is the sort of the pageantry and just the idea of qualifying for the Olympics. But B, it's also later. We're talking about Paris 2024. And C, it gets you a little bit closer in terms of the team you're going to put on the field to one that may actually end up representing your country at some point. Because it's not U20, it's U23. Both of these tournaments, though, go to the larger point. And I am to the point where I also care about the Olympics, if you want to make this point D, simply because the U.S. have failed to qualify for it. I am tired of not being able to send a team to the Olympics and to see these kind of players in more situations like this, these high pressure environments. So both of these tournaments are hugely significant from a developmental standpoint for a couple reasons. One, you want these guys and the same applies to the women's side, in as many competitive environments that simulate what a real World Cup or a Gold Cup or whatever tournament you want to talk about looks and feels like. You want them together for extended periods of time and learning how to navigate group stage and then the knockouts and all the stuff that comes with it. You have got to get as much experience with this as possible. And number two, you have got to get players familiar with the process of winning. It does not happen overnight. It is why you need to go to these tournaments. Whether you succeed or not, but to learn, okay, this is what we don't do, or, okay, we were able to get through CONCACAF, in theory, if the U.S. wins this tournament. So when we carry that to the World Cup at the U20 level, or the Olympics, now, right, step up in competition. Can we continue that? And these are the things that made us successful. You can start to reflect on that. It is not a coincidence that there is such a clear line you can draw between success at these sort of this final stage of the youth level and the first team. And look no further than that. You don't have to look any further than the team the U.S. just beat for proof of this. In Costa Rica. Costa Rica had a stretch where they were excellent. I believe that stretch ended in 2009. And so what do you know? Here comes this terrific crop of Costa Rica players who have gotten to all these World Cups and have been successful at them. And then the success at the youth level dissipated. And when you look at Costa Rica's first team right now, what do you see? You see a bunch of players who are in their 30s, and the players who are still eligible to play for the team the U.S. just beat, who are now being brought into World Cup qualifying in the Nations League, because the gap, the generation in between, if you want to use that word, the 23 to 28-year-olds do not exist. You go back and you look and, oh, that was the point where the Costa Rica was not successful at the youth level. And you can draw a fairly similar line to the U.S., and I want to dig more into that at some point. I just haven't had the time yet. That's why this is such a big deal. It absolutely correlates. I don't care if there aren't going to be that many spots available on the first team in theory, because all these guys are, from 19 to 28 right now. And so, it's not like Weston McKennie's going anywhere anytime soon. Tyler Adams, Christian Pulisic, you go down the list. This is your depth. Diego Luna might actually have something to say about all this. He is that good. And now I'm really excited to watch him play in MLS. But it's a learning about the process of winning thing for me. And so here we go. It's Honduras again for a spot in the Olympics again. Friday night. And I will never dismiss that as, oh, we've got all of these young players who are already up on the first team, so we don't need to worry about the youth mix. No. You don't know what's going to happen. These guys might even be better. You got plenty of opportunities for various players to be part of the national team picture coming up between this winter's World Cup and 2026. But it is all leading up to 2026. Missing out on the 2024 Olympics would be a real bummer. So we're going to see what these guys can do. Again, Friday night, Honduras already qualified for the U20 World Cup. Now, can you qualify for the Olympics as well? Finally, wanted to acknowledge this before we go to break and turn our attention to the Euros. Today it became official. Romelu Lukaku is going back to Inter Milan on a loan for this season. This is the kind of thing that happens when you have a player a manager doesn't want, who makes it clear he is happy to leave, but he's only leaving for one team. You get this kind of absolute home run for Inter. This move makes them my favorites in Serie A. Maybe they would have been anyway. We got to see how this transfer window ends up playing out, because you're hearing all kinds of Paulo Dybala, maybe, maybe not. What is AC Milan actually going to do? Because you lost some pieces. There are other pieces teams are interested in. What does Juventus do? So there are still more data to be gathered. But if you rosters as of right now, you make me pick, I'm picking Inter Milan because Romelu Lukaku is coming back. You know he wants to be there. He doesn't need to get integrated because he's, yes, different manager, but he knows these guys. He knows the city, the league. He thrived in it. And so the interesting part of this is that it doesn't solve the problem Chelsea has one bit. The problem is, what are you going to do long term with Lukaku? Because Inter is not buying him. Inter does not have the money to do it. If they did, they probably already would have gotten that deal done. Are you going to just keep loaning him back? Because that's an awful return on your investment you made in him. Are you going to try and hope that he has another fantastic season like he did the last time he was at Inter and then sell him? Are you convinced somebody is going to pay something close to what you did for him after he flopped for you and then went back to somewhere you already knew he could have success? And to a certain extent, I understand the value of, okay, we're going to push this decision down the road. And he's got a much better chance of rebuilding his value at Inter than he does here. Because Tuchel is not going to play him. Tuchel is not bending his style to him. It was just a mess. So maybe the plan is eventually we're going to try and sell him. Or maybe he just needs to get some confidence back and we're going to give this another shot. The only reason to believe anything would go differently is maybe Tuchel is gone by then, which is the other interesting part of this. That team was supposed to be right there battling for a Premier League title last season, and they were nowhere close. Tuchel came in and did so well so quickly and got them so organized and won a Champions League that he bought himself as much time as you can if you're Chelsea's manager. Now, the other factor here is that, right, Roman Abramovich is no longer the one making these decisions. So maybe you've got a longer leash now. Who knows? It's going to be really interesting to see how this all ends up playing out once sort of this next era of Chelsea is solidified and you know who's in your positions from a technical, front office standpoint, because everybody just left. So there's a world in which Tuchel is, this season doesn't go well either. Tuchel is gone. You decide you want a fresh start, and that new manager comes in and says, I want to try and build around Lukaku. Or at least I want Lukaku as my striker. He comes off another fantastic season for Inter. Maybe it works. Other than that, you're just pushing this decision down the line, which, considering everything that's going on at Chelsea, is not necessarily a bad thing. But sending him back to a team that cannot buy him and has, right, there's no options here. This is strictly a one-year thing. That doesn't do anything to solve the actual problem and answer the question you're going to have to face at some point, which is you just broke the bank on a guy that your manager doesn't seem to get along with well and was not good. And now has been between fine and bad for the two big Premier League clubs he's played at. He put up some numbers at Manchester United, but his best seasons were at Everton and with Inter. And it's not like he forgot how to play. So how far can you, if he is really good at Inter again, I go back to the question of how far can you drive his value up based on the teams who would be looking at him? And Manchester City probably wouldn't be interested at this point, but for example, Manchester City or Manchester United or Barcelona, right? The big teams outside of Serie A, PSG, whoever, are they going to be willing to give you what you want if he's not delivering at the clubs of their stature outside of Serie A? Because it's not like he hasn't done it in the Premier League, but he hasn't done it with the bright lights and the expectations. And so this is a really, really fascinating situation to see what happens again next summer. It's kind of like the Gareth Bale thing. Okay, sending him to Tottenham makes all the sense in the world for both sides. Tottenham's not buying him, though, so you're back at the same spot the next season, and it's more of Gareth Bale sitting on the bench and collecting his massive paycheck. So, we'll see. To me, those are the two things here, though. Is bravo, Inter. You did something that changes my outlook on Serie A without spending any kind of real money because you don't have any. And I would love to see what Chelsea is thinking long term about how this is going to play out. But for now, it works for both teams as a short term solution, just pushes the bigger decisions down the line.